Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. People are feeling more anxious than ever before. Not only are we living during a global pandemic, but buildings are set on fire, businesses are looted, and historical statues are pulled down. It's natural we would feel anxious in this chaotic world order we are living in right now, but author, pastor, and biblical counselor Josh Weidmann doesn't want us to live in fear, which is why he wrote a step-by-step guide of how to deal with anxiety in a biblical way, entitled The End of Anxiety, the Biblical Prescription for Overcoming Fear, Worry, and Panic. Anxiety is something that Josh struggled with his entire life. After years of praying that God would just take his anxiety away, he realized that while anxiety may never leave, he can still glorify God through moments of trial and suffering. By giving readers a raw and personal look into Josh's journey, The End of Anxiety inspires readers to rediscover God's ultimate purpose for our pain. He shares practical steps backed by Scripture to deal with anxiety and how we as believers can accomplish our main goal, to glorify God in everything we do. His story not only inspires readers to use their circumstances to glorify God, but it shows that we can live without being in a constant state of worry, stress, and anxiety. By putting our faith in God and trusting that He will be with us in our suffering, we will have a deeper, more fulfilling relationship with Messiah. Josh Weidmann's married to his best friend Molly, has 5 children. He's the senior pastor of Grace Chapel in Denver, Colorado. He's been speaking and writing about the power of Jesus for everyday life for 2 decades. He's a graduate of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and a certified biblical counselor. For more information, visit Josh Weidmann, Weidmann.com. Joining us now to talk about his new book, The End of Anxiety, the Biblical Prescription for Overcoming Fear, Worry, and Panic, is Josh Weidmann. Josh, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Eric. It's great to be with you today. Thanks for the opportunity and great introduction. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And as you would be hearing me say, Shalom Achi.
Yes.
Manishma.
Yes.
And so what we share in common is we both have a love for Israel. We both take regular tours to Israel. We're sold out for next year's trip. So we're now promoting our 2022 trip. All our trips are sold out over a year in advance.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. When is your trip scheduled for next year, or what season do you usually take tours in?
I'm always within the 50-day period between Passover and Pentecost.
Amazing. Great.
Always. It's either April or May. It's been that way for 20 years. I don't go during the feasts because nothing's open. And we are a messianic tour of Israel, so we don't go to churches. You know, when you talk about we walk where Jesus walked, Jesus didn't walk to First Baptist of Jerusalem.
You're right.
You know, so it's very interesting, and I applaud you for your love and support of Israel. Just by taking groups there, for every person you take, you impact 100 lives.
Yeah, that's great. That's well said. I've never heard it said that way.
And the economy is supported that way. But you touch 100 individual lives, from my boys on the street selling you scarves, to my friend who will get on your bus at the Garden Tomb, and I've known him since he was 13. He used to sell.
The guy with the bags and the camels. That guy.
Right. Well, he stands outside, but the one that comes on the bus is Mohammed, and he used to sell candy bars, but now he sells you the silver. All right, that's Mohammed, and I met him when he was 13. He's now 35 with 3 children, and so, you know, it's very interesting that as a side note, when you and I go to Israel as many times as we have as many Muslim friends and relationships there as we do Jewish and Christian. And so when you see people year in and year out and you build these relationships, you are welcomed as a brother. And
Yes.
so someone walking up to you on the streets of Jerusalem or in the marketplace, and the group looks on, and you two are hugging each other, and you're kissing each other on the cheek, and in some cases there's weeping because just a side story, has nothing to do with any of this, but you always take a picture overlooking Jerusalem while you're standing on the top of the Mount of Olives.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, the man who has had that position of taking that photograph has been there for almost 40 years. He had a heart attack 5 years ago and had open heart surgery.
I actually heard that. I knew that. Yes.
And my guide called me and told me where he was in the hospital, and I sent a card and I sent flowers to him.
Amazing.
And his son took over the business, and so now the son takes the pictures and the father delivers them.
I love that.
And when I saw him the next year, he had lost like 40 pounds and was doing well. And he said to me, he said, of all the rabbis across all of Israel, of all the rabbis that I have met, he said, you're the only rabbi who acknowledged me being in the hospital. I said, why would I not? You have been my friend for all these years. We have no pickpockets. We have no problems. You keep everybody. There's good people. There's bad people. But you do with the right people, they keep the bad ones away. And the two of us wept. He was so touched and he was so moved. And his son came over and he said, what you did for my father, he will never forget. And so the three of us are there and we're weeping as family, and the group's looking on and going, what, you know, this is supposed to be his sworn enemy. This is this Abraham, this Isaac and Ishmael. There's supposed to be daggers and you know, what's going to happen next. And it's a family reunion, and people don't understand that the heart of Israel is love.
Yes. Yeah. I say often to the tours when I take them, I say, you know, we're going to go look at a lot of rocks, but we're not here to see rocks. We're here to see people. And we do the same thing. We don't go to, I kind of pride myself on, we don't go to any churches. We do all back hikes. And my book that I wrote on Israel is called He Walked With Us. It's all based on God, of course, walking with us, and Yahweh and the Old Testament stories, but also Christ ultimately walking with us. And so we walk. We do a ton of walking, and we're on the bus here and there for sure, but it's about walking and being with the people and the vendors and the bagel sellers and some of my favorite restaurants that I take people to. I mean, these are family. I love them. Our hotel, where we stay inside the walls in the city, I mean, those guys have become like brothers to me, and they're Muslim, right? They're different, and it's amazing how people say, how do you love them so much, or how do you have such a relationship? They're different than us. And I said, exactly. We're not here to not show Christ or to only learn about Christ. We're here to show Christ, and there's living people that need to see the love of Christ in us, and that comes through year after year building these relationships and loving on these people. So I love your heart. It's such an honor to be with you because of you're a front runner in that. I mean, you've been doing this obviously far longer than I have, and I hope to. I say in the introduction of my book, I hope I'm leading tours till my legs stop working. You know, I want to just keep going over there and showing people this land. But thank you for your encouragement and even your example and story.
Well, it's very important. People don't understand that you're there to see the people of the book and the land of the book. And if you put it in that context, but I applaud you for that. It is so important, and you tell people this is not a vacation. You can take your vacation when you come back.
Correct.
Right, but you are not going on a vacation.
Nope. But I always say it's the trip that keeps on giving. So you can go on a cruise that gives to you while you're on the cruise, but this trip, going to Israel, it will give for the rest of your life. It's the trip that keeps on giving. So yeah,
we'd say it turns the Bible from black and white to living color.
Yep, absolutely. 3D even.
So, back to the subject of hand is this new work, The End of Anxiety. I want to kind of go back in time with you and take a little journey to young Josh and
Sure.
the struggles that you had with anxiety. And as you were led by God into counseling,
Hmm.
it was, in hindsight, in retrospect, you can see how God used you to not be a sympathetic counselor,
Right.
which there are many sympathetic counselors,
Yeah.
not just to be a compassionate counselor, for there are many compassionate counselors, but there are not that many empathetic
Yeah.
counselors. And
Yeah.
those who have actually experienced, who can say, I've never lost a child, and I've had to counsel people on the death of a child. I can't say I know how you feel.
Correct. Yeah.
I can only say I can only imagine how you feel.
Right.
But if we believe in Romans 8:28, God will use all things will work together. So your journey through and in anxiety,
Yeah.
right, is for the glory of God,
Yeah.
because He could trust you with the anxiety, with the panic, with the worry, that
Yeah.
you would use it for His good and for His glory. Otherwise, He would have given the assignment to somebody else.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I signed the contract for this book, knowing that I dealt with it, and it's been a journey for me my whole life. I thought, of course, I could write this book. I'll have to pull from the coffers of my life and dig deep into Scripture. But what's crazy, Rabbi Eric, is after I signed the contract, the Lord had me then live through some of the worst years of my anxiety. So though I dealt with it my whole life, it's as if the Lord said, let's make sure that you understand the school of anxiety. And then the book got delayed, and frankly, it got delayed because of my own anxiety. I had to write to the publisher. I said, I can't do this. I can't get this done. I'm in one of the worst seasons I've ever been in. But the publisher was gracious to say, we still would like it. Take your time, do what you need to do, and get through this dark valley. And that dark valley of anxiety really produced even a better book. And the publisher has agreed with that. And I said, you got a different book now. And so all that to say, while I've dealt with it my whole life, some of the most intense seasons were around the writing of this book. And that made the pages of this book all the more empathetic, to your point. I was able to say to the reader, I know what it's like to not be able to eat, to breathe, to feel like you're going to die because panic overwhelms you. I know what it's like to have worry and fear grip your soul so tight that you feel like it'd be better to die than to live. I now know what that feels like in a more real way than I ever had before. And then to take the scriptures and to take the truth of the Messiah and to apply it to life and to say, we can get through this. We can push through even our most overwhelming emotions. That all started coming together in a very sweet way, not just for the reader. I've said if this book never hit the light of day, it was still good for my soul, right? But I hope that it continues to help people as they deal with their own anxiety, worry, fear, or panic.
There's lots of clinical descriptions of what anxiety is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you articulate what anxiety feels like?
Yeah. How
can I discern? There's the Matthew 6, do not worry. Is worry anxiety? Fear not. Okay, is fear a form of anxiety? Is anxiety a manifestation of fear of something happening that has not happened yet, and feeling the consequences of it having happened, even though it hasn't happened?
Yes, sometimes. So I do talk about what I call imaginative fear, or things that we make up in our minds. Think about the disciples on the Sea of Galilee who suppose they were seeing a ghost, and really they were in the presence of Christ. They were imagining the myths of these People who would have died at sea are now coming back to get them, and so they're overwhelmed by that. So I think we deal with that. But to answer your question very directly, I actually believe anxiety is more of the root issue, and then worry, fear, panic, those things are kind of the fruits of anxiety or the outplaying of anxiety. So when I deal with anxiety at a root level, and when the Bible tells me do not be anxious about anything, it's speaking to the root level. But when I deal with it at a root level, I'm having an overwhelming emotional reaction to something that might be real or imaginative, made up in my mind. It might be something real or not real, but I'm feeling anxiety, and therefore usually a lack of trust, a lack of dependence, a lack of right perspective. But that plays out in worry, fear, panic, those kinds of things. So for example, I'll use a child example, but this is true in adulthood as well. My niece right now is really struggling with the fear that there's poison in her food. She keeps having worry about poison in her food. She's 6. And and obviously her parents aren't poisoning her. They don't even know where she got this idea that poison's in her food, but she keeps avoiding food because she says there's poison in it, and will freak out over it, right? Freak out over every meal. She has a deeper level of anxiety that's manifesting itself in something that is imaginative. It's made up in her mind. She's formed this idea that someone's poisoning her, and so she's plagued by worry. But there's a deeper level of anxiety. So then back to adulthood, I think we deal with the same thing. We have a root of anxiety that will then force us into worry, fear, or panic. And I think that can happen in 4 different ways. I talked about that in the book. I talk about it manifests itself in our relationships. It manifests itself in our circumstances. It can manifest itself spiritually speaking. We can have, lack of repentance over sin, or even consequences of repented sin. We can have anxiety over. And then I think it even manifests in our outer man, our physical being, right? I think there can be chemical imbalances and things, but often our anxiety will even affect us physically.
So let's put this out there. There are those that would say that fear is the absence of faith. Mm-hmm. That anything to do with the dark night of the soul, mm-hmm. let's throw all these things into that pot, the dark night of the soul,
okay.
Are of the enemy. Mm. There are things that people have bought into that have, one, caused them not to want to come forward.
Yes.
Because they'll be shamed. Yeah. And shame is at the core of almost every sin response is somewhere rooted in a shame of some kind. But to come forward and say, as yourself who is in ministry, someone to say that here I am, an ambassador of God. God could take this away. He's sovereign. Okay? So if God's sovereign and He could take it away, is it a lack of faith? Is this my fault? Is this self-inflicted? Is there something wrong with me?
Every one of those questions I've wrestled with and deeply. Lord, why is this my fault? Why are you not taking it away? You have power to take this away. You don't. The shame issue that you mentioned, Rabbi Eric, is a very true issue, especially, like I mentioned, when our anxiety comes from sin or the consequences of sin. We're all guilty, and shame is the feeling or the emotion that comes when you are guilty. Guilty is not an emotion. Guilty is a verdict, right? But we have shame that comes from being guilty and having sin. God has forgiven us in Christ, so why still have anxiety about that? That's a valid question. Maybe our anxiety isn't related to something we did, but maybe it's related to someone else's sin and that impact on our. Why doesn't God take that away? So I think, to directly answer your question, yes, there are some anxieties that the Lord allows because He's working some type of sin out in us, and maybe will even allow Job, for example, to go through so much suffering and not stop it because he's working something out in him. I talk about this in one of the chapters in the book. Job was so anxious. Job had so much going on in his life and so much suffering, and yet God could have stopped it, and he didn't. And to use your part of your question of did the enemies after him? Well, yes, but only by God's sovereign permission, right? God was still sovereign over all of that, and he still is in our life. So I think it is sometimes the enemy, but under God's sovereign hand. I think there are other times where the Lord allows us to feel the dark night of the soul so that we will have greater faith or dependence upon him. I think about Psalm 88, right? It's one of the most sad of all the Psalms, and it ends with, darkness is a closer friend to me, God, than you are, right? That's a blunt statement. But I'll be honest with you, Rabbi Eric, I've prayed something like that, right? I've said, Lord, where are you? My darkness, my anxiety, my panic, my fear is way closer to me than you are. So are you going to show up or not? And even as I'm honest with him and I say those things to him, he's so faithful to then come in and to say, I'm working out something in you. And in the moments when I can't hear his voice, usually his hand is very close, right? Usually when God's silent, he's even closer than when he's speaking loudly. And he's working and he's pruning and he's cutting. And all of that happens when we have overwhelming emotions like anxiety and depression.
You know, Psalm 13 it jumps into my spirit. How long, O Lord, will you be silent?
Yeah.
You know, look upon me and answer, O God, my Father. But then he ends it and says, but I will trust in your unfailing love.
Yeah.
Because you have been good to me.
Yes.
And you will be good to me.
Love that. Thank you for recalling that. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
If we were to label, as many in the church do, we would have to label Moses, Elijah, Jeremiah, every doubter, every single prophet that came to a crossroads, to the Samsons, to the I've just weeks have been pounding on this statement. Stop calling her Rahab the harlot. She was the first Corrie ten Boom that ever existed. Why do you keep calling her Rahab the harlot? Why don't you let her go of her past? She was Boaz's mother, and she's mentioned the lineage of Jesus. Could you just get off her back about what her past was? Why do you want me to remind you of what you were before you were redeemed? Before you were, you're the voice of the enemy when you promote her as Rahab the harlot. You're reminding her of her past. That's what the devil does. He reminds you of your past. God reminds you of your future. He gives you your promises in your future. Okay? This dwelling on the past is not of God. There are so many examples of fear, pain, suffering, and anxiety in the Bible that being created in the image of God, and we're not talking about physical attributes, we're talking about the spiritual attributes of God. Is there the possibility that the simple statement that where we are weak, he is strong, we have to be weak? If we always operate as strong, we don't need him.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that statement. How I would add to it is we have to abandon a false sense of self and a false understanding of the gospel. So we are often not acknowledging our weakness when we have a false sense of self. And what I mean by that is I can do this, or I'll get through this, or I've got this, right? That's not a sense of weakness or acknowledging your weakness. Rather, it's saying, I can do this. I remember one time my sister rebuking me. I was in the middle of just a season of panic. I was standing on my driveway. It's my daughter's birthday. We're waiting to go inside to celebrate my little 2-year-old daughter's birthday, and I'm crying on the driveway. And she's like, she gives me a hug. She just showed up for the party, and I said, she's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, I'm dealing with some stuff. I'm overwhelmed, but don't worry, I got this. And I remember she got in my face and she said, "You don't got this." She's like, "Stop saying that. God's got this. You have to acknowledge that you're weak right now and you need God." And I think that's a common misnomer when dealing with anxiety or overwhelming emotions. Well, I got this. Give me another tissue. I'll get through this. Let me go have a good run or a workout. Let me go have a good therapy session, and all of a sudden I'll get better. Well, while some of those things may help, those are not the false sense of you can do this on your own. That's not the gospel. And that's what I mean by a false gospel. A false self-help gospel is, I'm going to get through this. But never does Christ proclaim that. Christ says, no, I'm strong when you're weak. I'm enough. You're not enough, right? You need me in every aspect, not just for salvation, but beyond salvation. And we must trust that when dealing with our overwhelming emotions. So to come full circle, I think, yes, there is a sense where we have to acknowledge our weakness to then see the strength of Christ. But we have to abandon a false sense of self and a false gospel in order to see the beauty of the gospel in the midst of our own brokenness.
Jesus says in the book of Revelation, "I reserve the right for the overcomer to sit at my right hand and eat from the tree of life." Seat of honor. In order to be an overcomer, you would have had to have something to overcome.
That's good.
The human condition is that we tend to curse the obstacles that come into our life.
Yeah.
And, oh no, not again.
Yeah.
Gomer. Oh no, not again. Oh no, not
Right.
again. Right?
Yeah.
However, if you take a look at every passage in the Bible where there was an obstacle, that the blessing was on the other side of breakthrough. There was always something greater, right, on the other side of the obstacle.
Yes.
We tend to look at faith as something that is going to be an immunization, inoculation, and a hedge of protection about us to keep those things from happening: anxiety, worry, fear, panic, sleep disorders, all these things.
Right.
But the reality is that, first of all, you're believing in somebody you can't see. You're relying on a strength of a Holy Spirit that's taken up residence in you that you can't clearly identify separate from your sin nature, because you really have this war going on inside of you, and you have no idea who's doing the talking.
Sure.
The voices sound the same.
Yeah.
So you're in this constant state of internal war, and God designed it that way when He said, "I'm going to send the Comforter." But the Comforter was to bring you this wisdom, knowledge, power, and understanding to overcome the sin nature, but it's something you have to do daily. And it's a battle going on inside of you. Paul was eloquent when he said, look, first of all, not that I've accomplished all this, but this I do, forgetting what's behind, I press on. But he also said, but I do the things I shouldn't do, and I don't do what I ought to do.
Right.
That's the human condition.
It is.
And transparency, to me, is, people are talking about awakening and revival, and I think the word of the day has to be transparency. For us to really be effective in our Christian witness, we have to remember our testimony, and that our testimony is being developed every day. It's not that where I started this journey and how I came to faith. My testimony is from December the 21st, 1996, to today. What has God done in my life in the last 24 years? When I came to faith at 44 years old out of a synagogue.
Wow. That's great.
What has he done in the last 24 years? That's my testimony. Not that I was an Orthodox Jew,
Yes.
but what has he done? He's taken me from the worry, the fear. And do I have it? Well, yeah, of course I do.
Sure.
We're in the unknown, dealing with the unseen, dealing with the immovable, acknowledging that there's a power over us, higher than us, and that we really don't have as much control as we think we have.
Correct.
And we're supposed to take great comfort in the fact that, okay, I'm believing in something that's unseen, but I have to trust in His Word, and that's my foundation, and I truly am anchored, and I'm really pretty solid, even in what Jesus says, if you follow me, there will be tribulation. This is what tribulation looks like.
Yes.
Fear, worry, anxiety, panic, difficult times. How am I going to make it through? Questions. I think that all of this is a question mark. Fear is a question mark. Worry is a question mark. Panic is a question mark. Anxiety is a question mark. Sadness is a question mark. I don't have the answer, therefore the question is consuming me and bringing me to the point where my soul has a head-on collision with my spirit.
Yes.
And now in the carnage and the wreckage of that collision comes fear, worry, panic, anxiety, all of that, until I start to get the train back up on the track, and the cranes come in, and the triage is done, and all of that, because I am in the image of God, 2 parts invisible, 1 part visible. I've got these colliding concepts going on inside of me that I can name them, but I can't define them.
Yeah.
Because they're shifting.
I love how you say it. It's a question mark. I mean, all of these things are question marks. Fear, worry, sadness, depression, anxiety. These things are question marks from the Lord. Like, are you going to trust me? Are you going to let me do something greater in you? Like you said, are you going to let me put the train back on the tracks and let your brokenness show the beauty of the gospel? I think about when they were out on the Sea of Galilee in Mark chapter 8, and they're in the middle of this storm, and all of a sudden Jesus asks them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" It was a question mark, right? Now, we're not even told that they ever answered it. I joke that they probably said, "Jesus, you just go back and sleep on your cushion in the stern of the boat." And then they turn to each other and they say, "Who is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?" He asks them a question, "Why are you so afraid?" They answer a question with a question of, "Who is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?" And I think it's in their question, they're saying, how foolish are we not to trust and not to have greater dependence on him? And that's true for any one of our emotions. When life becomes a train wreck, there is a question: do you still have no faith? Are you still going to trust me, or are you going to abandon me? Right? As John chapter 6, we see that many disciples abandoned him. I think we have to answer the question with, who is this? We've seen him do great things. I mean, Job got there. God had to prompt him there, but Job basically said, "Where were you when I created the foundations of the world?" I mean, these are questions that call us to greater dependence when we're overwhelmed with our most crazy emotions.
Several years ago, there was a movie that came out about the Gary Powers story about the spy mission to Russia, and he was captured, and we had a Russian spy, and Tom Hanks was in it, and Tom Hanks was representing the Russian as his attorney, and as they went to different interrogations, he would say to the little Russian man, "Are you worried?" And every time he asked him that, his response was, "Would it help?"
I remember that. That's right. Yeah.
Would it help? And that has stuck with me as a great biblical truth.
Yeah,
that's
good.
Exactly how does fear, does it help? Does my worrying help? Is it changing my circumstance? Is my panic helping? Is it going to change my, will worrying about it help?
Yeah, that's good.
We're talking with Josh Weidmann, author of The End of Anxiety, the Biblical Prescription for Overcoming Fear, Worry, and Panic. And it's told in the first person.
Mm-hmm.
His person. His own experiences and how God led him to not just deliverance, because in reality, he still experiences.
Yeah.
So, not a story of deliverance, but actually a manual of navigation.
Yeah.
How do you navigate the waters of fear, anxiety, and panic? By using God as the rudder and the Word of God as the roadmap, as the chart in which to navigate your life. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the tools that are contained in here and some of the sage counsel that he has for you that are going to make you want to get a copy of this book and apply this biblical prescription for overcoming fear, worry, and panic. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and my special featured guests twice per month with Rabbi Zeb Parat and Carl Gallups, and monthly with Dr. Michael Heiser, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Timothy Jennings, Dr. Mark Baker, Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, Drs. Michelle and Mark Sherwood, Dr. Kim Moss, Derek Gilbert, Peter Rosenberger, Brandon Gallups, Steve Fair, Stephen Black, and Sean Tabbitt for in-depth insights into Israel, prophecy, the unseen realm, the brain, spiritual warfare, overcoming shame, mysteries of the Bible, prophetic insights, the sensational and the supernatural, caregiving, addiction recovery, understanding the divided heart, same-sex attraction, and much more. We're proud to feature some of the greatest biblical minds from both Israel and around the United States. Check out our featured guest lineup and 24/7 feed on ignitinganation.com or watch by topic on any device with our free apps. If you can't find what you need, you're just not looking in the right place. Follow us on social media and download our free apps today.
With today's smartphone technology, news, information, sports, and entertainment is widely available and almost unbounded. But what about the information that believers in Yeshua are looking for? Well, now there's an app for that. Igniting a Nation now has apps available for Android and iPhone. With our app, you'll gain access to everything you would in our website, from our featured guests to our live streaming shows. Visit Google Play or the Apple Store and download Igniting a Nation's new app today.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, inviting you to join me and Israel's #1 rated guide, Edo Canaan, for our annual Israel trip. Our 2022 trip is now open for registration for our 18th trip to Israel. Our trip will take us from Tel Aviv to the Galilee, down to the Dead Sea, and 4 nights in Jerusalem. You will walk where Yeshua walked and watch the Bible turn from black and white to living color. Visit ignitinganation.com/events and download the registration form today. No, it's not too early to take advantage of our payment plan designed to fit any budget. All of our trips sell out, and we want you to experience this life-changing journey. Registration is now open for April 2nd to 13th, 2022, and we promise you, you will never read your Bible the same way again. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Josh Weidmann, the author of The End of Anxiety, the Biblical Prescription for Overcoming Fear, Worry, and Panic. Josh, welcome back.
Thank you. Great being with you.
So, Doc, I'm fearful, I'm worried, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. Write me a prescription.
Yeah. Well, before the break, you said it's not a story of deliverance. And I would say the book here, while I didn't really find the end of anxiety, it is a story of purpose. So I want to answer your question by saying the first part of the prescription is knowing the purpose of your anxiety. In fact, when my editor, Carla, she was the final editor on the project. She jumped on it. We're very far in the process, and she said, "I've read the whole book in detail. I think you need to change the title." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "You never found the end. You say that you might still deal with it." And I said, "Yes, but it's a play on words. The end is God's purpose in it." And she, of course, got that, but we made it even stronger throughout the book with her help of just saying, listen, the greatest thing to help you when you're overcoming anxiety is to understand God has a purpose in it. And in the very beginning chapter, I talk about the chief end of all things is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. If that's true, that has to also be true of our anxiety, that even our emotion, the chief end of our emotion, is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Now that sounds crazy, but if you were to say, hey, help me get through my anxiety, that's where I'd start every single time. You have to understand that there is a purpose in this. God will glorify Himself through it. You mentioned Romans 8:28 earlier. He has His purpose. He's working all things together. And in verse 29 of Romans 8, it says He's working us into the likeness of His Son, right? That's the purpose. That's where we're going here. That helps me in my most anxious moments to realize God has a purpose in it. And there is a joy, and joy is bigger than circumstances. Joy is better than happiness, right? Joy is a deep-seated reliance upon God, even when circumstances don't make sense. And so the first thing someone must do in trying to overcome anxiety is realize God has purpose in it, and that you can still enjoy the Lord in the midst of it. Now, within the pages of the book, I've put 48 different action steps, 3 at the end of each chapter, to help people know how to apply this. Now, these can be things like studying the character of God, praying through the character of God, memorizing certain passages, writing down things about the past and things that are causing anxiety, and prayerfully presenting them to God in the future, discussing these things with other people. So there are a lot of things that we can do. But again, this isn't about a self-help gospel as much as it is a reliance upon God and trusting He has purposes even in the midst of our anxiety.
What I hear you saying is that we've been asking the wrong question in the face of whatever the triggers are.
Yes.
And the question that we ask is, Lord, how do I get out of this? And that's the wrong question.
Correct. Yep.
The right question is, what do you want me to get out of this?
Yes.
Not how do you want me to get out of this? What do you want me to get out of this?
Yeah, it was a friend of mine, Rabbi, who he corrected me, and I wrote about this somewhere in the pages of the book, but I was sitting at breakfast with him. There's another pastor, and I told him about the season of anxiety I was in. We ended up talking for so long because he empathized with me. He'd had his own anxiety. We sat for so long that we finally had to give up the table and go walk around the restaurant. We were just doing laps around the restaurant. And I just kept saying, how do I get through this? How do I make this end? And he said, you're asking the wrong question. You need to ask God, what are you doing in this? What are you doing through this to make me more like Christ? And I'll never forget it. And he's still a very close friend. He just preached at our church 2 weeks ago, and I recounted that story to him. I said, thank you for reminding me that God has purpose even in my most painful days.
You bring up a very good point. Is part of the therapeutic life of a believer making sure that we have people in our lives that we can speak honestly and candidly with, that have wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and we can reflect with and reach out to, not always necessarily a licensed profession counselor, but people who we consider to be mature in the knowledge of Scripture, mature in their faith, to be able to have not just accountability, but to have, I have what I call my safe people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I have a handful of them, just a small handful. They're my safe people. They're my 24-hour, 7-day a week. Okay?
That's good.
Whatever it is. I was writing a letter to my daughter. I was very distraught over something, and I sent it Dr. Mark Baker, 3 hours away in California, and said, Mark, this is what I'm struggling with. Tell me, and he just wrote me back and he said, how can you argue with the love of a father? Send it. I mean, I was agonizing over every word, and it was a very loving but very honest dialogue. So you have to have that in your life.
I absolutely do. Yeah, I talk about never fighting alone as one of the key things for getting through. I'm looking back at this chapter to see if I could just see their names quickly. I mean, I know that there's Jason and Adam that I can call in a second. I mean, this whole chapter I talk about how we're never meant to be an island. Isolation is the opposite of the gospel. So we must continue to be with other people. Now, I'm a counselor. I believe there's a place for counseling. I believe there's a place for someone who has training to help you through some of the hard things in your life. But I also believe the Spirit of God lives in all believers. So when I'm connected to other believers who have the Spirit of God dwelling in them, those safe people, and I'm like you, I don't have many of them, but the ones that I have many friends and acquaintances, but not people that are my 24-hour ride or die kind of people. And I only have a few of those, but those are the people that got me through some of the hardest seasons of life. And so I would say to the person who's dealing with anxiety, if you cannot quickly identify your safe circle and who's riding with you, then you need to fix that right away. That's more important than counseling, medication, anything else. You have to have other, and the key phrase there is people who know Christ and have the Spirit in them, because the Lord does that. He works through other people, and those are the people that would, I think of my friend Jeremy. He texts me at just the right moments, right? God prompted him to be in my life at even the hardest seasons. Jason came and cried with me after one of my worst panic attacks. Adam would call me regularly and just pray with me over the phone. That's so important for us to have friends who will ride with us for the long haul and in the worst moments of our life.
My takeaway from the end of anxiety, the biblical prescription for overcoming fear, worry, and panic, is that this is a journey orchestrated by the Lord that is for His purpose and His glory, and your charge is to seek His face and to seek His purpose and to ask Him the question, why? And what do you want me to do with this? It's no different than a prophetic word. If God gives me a prophetic word, my first question is, what do you want me to do with this? Am I free to share this? Is this for me? Is this for you? Who is this for? I've been trained that way. I've been taught that way, that in that particular area of constant communication with the Lord, when He shows me something, to automatically say, who's that for? Is that for me? He may say to me, no, now that you've asked, now that you've acted responsibly, okay, as I've entrusted you, okay, this is what I want you to do with it. Well, if He'll do that in one area, He'll do that in all areas. And so if we stop taking what we would call these psychological conditions and put them back into the human Christian condition, then God will deal with them the same way He deals with all of them, and that is with a purpose, a plan, and a blessing for you or someone else. And it may not be for now. And you may not know when it's for or who it's for. But it has to do with trust in the architect of saying, all right, I'm fearful, I'm worried, I'm upset. God must have something, so I'm going to talk to Him. I'm going to go to Him. And I'm going to go to the people in my circle. And I'm going to seek. And that's why it says there's wisdom in a multitude of godly counsel.
Yes. Amen.
Josh, we've run out of time. I'd love to have you back on the program. You're a great guy, and so many people don't know how to navigate this. There are lots of approaches and techniques and charts and graphs and stuff, but I think that the raw transparency that you bring to it and the experience that you've had with it, that now that we look at you and say, well, no, he doesn't need to be institutionalized. He actually can function and have issues in his life, that maybe he's just like everybody else who in reality has issues in their life, whether they admit them or not. So the book is called The End of Anxiety, Josh Weidmann. You can find more about him at joshweidmann.com. Highly recommend it. The End of Anxiety, the biblical prescription for overcoming fear, worry, and panic. Josh, blessing to have you on the program, and we just pray blessings on your work. And as you navigate, that we don't pray for more of these experiences, but that you find more joy in these experiences as you navigate through them. So we thank you very much for being a part of Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi Eric. It's been a total privilege, and I hope to share a cup of coffee with you in Israel at Aroma someday. Let's meet face to face. I would love to.
Aroma, that's it. I'll be at Mount Scopus, at the Aroma at Mount Scopus for 4 days straight. I can tell you the days.
That's great. I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
God bless.
Thanks for your time.
All right. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.